Good afternoon. I'm Tracy Hughes, the Communications Coordinator for the CSRD, and we're here today for a basic lesson in mosquito control, Mosquito Control 101. We have here with us Cheryl Phippen from Saketwa Environmental. So she's one of our contractors who does the mosquito control. And she's going to speak to us, give us a little bit of background, and then we're going to do some questions, ask some questions of Cheryl, since she's our expert here today. Before I do that, I want to acknowledge that we are meeting in service to the Columbia-Shuswap Regional District, which is on the traditional and unceded territories of the Secwepemc, Silks Okanagan, Synext, and Ktunaxa nations. We are grateful to be able to live, work, and play in this beautiful area. So with that, hi Cheryl, nice to see you,
Hi.
have you here. We appreciate you joining us. If you if you can just share your screen with us, and I'll turn the mic over to you.
Sure. Let's get the presentation back up again. There it is. Oh, of course, start it from the beginning. There we are. Okay, can you hear me?
I can, perfect.
Okay,
Looks good, Cheryl.
great. All right, well, I'm Cheryl Phippen. I'm a mosquito biologist for Saketwa Environmental, and I've been the mosquito control contractor for the Columbia-Shuswap Regional District since 2012, working on both the Lee Creek, Scotch Creek program and the Revelstoke program. So today I just want to go through a little bit of basic mosquito biology and then give an overview of what we do to control mosquitoes, and then do a little bit of math to kind of give people an idea of how many mosquitoes are out there and what that means for residents in the areas that are affected. So we all learn about caterpillars in school that, they have this 4-stage life cycle: eggs, caterpillar, they go into a cocoon and they come out as an adult. Well, what we typically don't learn is that all flies, which mosquitoes are a fly, and beetles have the same life cycle. So this is a mosquito, adult mosquito, just stepping out of the water, stepping out of its cocoon stage. So female mosquitoes require a blood meal, and they use that blood meal, enough protein to develop their eggs. And then, of course, they lay eggs. So some mosquitoes lay their eggs on the surface of the water, like these ones. Other mosquitoes will lay their eggs in moist soil, so in areas that are presumably going to flood again in subsequent years. Eggs hatch, and out comes the larvae, or like a moth would be the caterpillar stage. We have the larval stage of mosquitoes, and it's always in standing water. And this is an important thing to note. They're not in moist or spongy grass in the backyard. They can't develop in that. They can't develop kind of in your hay field unless there's actually water for them to swim. And it doesn't need to be a lot of water. It could be as small as like a cattle hoof print, but they do actually need to be able to swim. So these are just some of the types of larvae that we have in British Columbia. We have different genuses of larvae. They all kind of look a little different to us. And just a little bit about them. They require they detach the surface of the water with their kind of those little siphons that are on their rear ends there. They don't have gills, so they can't get oxygen from the water. They must attach to the surface and breathe from the air. So that requires them to have very still water. If they're, it's running at all, then they are really poor swimmers and they can't attach and breathe. And so when we find the mosquito larvae, typically they're hanging from the surface. We look at them and they go flip, 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 that type of swim, and dive down when we look at them. Once they have gone through some stages as a larvae, they go into their cocoon stage, and it looks like this. It's also in water. It's their pupal stage. They still have those siphons kind of attached to the head there that attach the surface so that they can breathe from the surface they can't breathe in the water. When we start to see them at this stage, it's discouraging for us because they're no longer feeding, and so we cannot control them once they hit their pupal stage. And after a certain time as pupae, depending on water temperature and the species, they also emerge again, and we complete that cycle. So some basic mosquito biology. There's about 45 species of mosquitoes in the interior BC. Like I said before, the females are the only ones that bite. Males are actually pollinators. So they pollinate grasses and some flowers. So I often get asked, well, what good are they anyway? Well, they are. They're pollinators. So they do serve a biological purpose, the males do, as well as the obvious of being food for in their aquatic stage and in their terrestrial stages. And again, I want to reiterate that all larvae develop in standing water, somewhere where they can swim. Now, there's a picture here of a male mosquito. He's got a big fuzzy antennae, and they actually use those antennae to find females. Our nuisance mosquitoes in British Columbia are the ones that are in the highest numbers. So we have extremely high numbers of, they come from the genus Aedes. Most of these species lay their eggs in soil. Those eggs become wet with rising floodwaters in subsequent years, or rising snowmelt in subsequent years. The larvae, it varies depending how long, depending on the species and depending on the weather, it varies how long it will take them to go from hatching from their egg to their pupal stage. If it's warm and shallow and there's lots of nutrients, larvae can develop in as short as 5 to 7 days. So that really keeps us on our toes. We have to be monitoring quickly or constantly. And then some of our more snowmelt mosquitoes, they start developing under the ice, and those might take even 4 or even more weeks to develop to their pupal stage. Adults of these genera of the Aedes typically emerge in really high numbers and all at once. Most of them only bite once. They lay their eggs and they die. So that means that they can be very short-lived unless they have a cool place to avoid the hot sun. So things like long grass, brush, all that lush, gorgeous forest, say around Revelstoke and Scotch Creek. Those are places where those adults can hang out and avoid the sun, so then it prolongs their life. Females are selective about a couple of things. They're very selective about what they will bite. So we have a few species in BC that will only feed on birds. We have some generalist feeders that will bite on humans, birds, large animals. We have a small handful of species that only like to bite large mammals, and they will sniff us for a really long time before they kind of give up and might bite us. And we actually have one species that only bites frogs. Mosquitoes are also selective about where they're willing to lay their eggs. So we have a couple of species in the interior and in the Okanagan that love laying their eggs and developing in those alkali ponds, those ponds with that little bit of white powder around the outside. And they're actually a really aggressive species that will bite at 32 degrees in the middle of the day. We have species that like polluted areas like ditches or wastewater treatment plants. We have some that prefer urban areas over rural areas. And we have some species that lay their eggs in standing water in containers or in tree holes, and then others that lay their eggs in the soil. So the two major components of the CSRD nuisance mosquito and surveillance programs are mosquito surveillance, larvae and adults, and along with that goes surveillance of the weather, the snowpack. Is there rain coming? Is there heat coming? So a lot of other kind of outside monitoring things. And then obviously mosquito abatement. All of the program, the entire program for the CSRD and actually everywhere in the province, all the programs are aimed at treating mosquitoes in their larval stage. And treatments are made by ground or helicopter. And there is no current programs that do any kind of mosquito adulticiding. So using fogs or any kind of chemicals to treat the adults. I just threw this slide in just to give a picture of what it looks like for adult mosquito surveillance. So we have, you might see these in anywhere. We have them set in a number of areas throughout our programs. And they're just a little light trap. Black light comes on at night. The mosquitoes are attracted to the black light. Fan comes on and clicks them in the little container. We collect adults annually and try to collect them at the same site each year to determine what species are present and how many there are. And then we look at the conditions for that summer and say, okay, yep, this is the number of mosquitoes that we would expect, and this is the species we would expect. If we start seeing more mosquitoes than we would expect or different species entering the area, then we know we've got to look. Maybe we have a new type of a habitat, or there's a farmer that started flood irrigating or something like that. And so we would start searching other areas to see what might be making that change in species composition. We also do our habitat mapping. So we have all of our habitats and all of our programs are mapped where we know that we can expect mosquito larvae to be. And we monitor these depending on what type of habitat they are. If they're a permanent pond, we might start early season because some of those larvae will be developing even underneath the ice. We'll start developing our river flood sites, obviously when the rivers start to flood, and irrigation, seepage, possibly flood irrigated pastures. We'll do those on a regular schedule or when a farmer tells us they're about to flood things. Throw in some slides. This is from the other contractor that works for the CSRD, Moral Biosciences. And so this is some of the habitat areas that are treated in the Golden area. These are some maps that all of our staff have, and they have them on iPads so they can walk straight to the sites. That all the red outlined areas are the habitats that we know of and are able to treat in the Revelstoke area. And here's some from Lee Creek. Obviously, the biggest challenge in Lee Creek is Suitswick Provincial Park. We aren't permitted to do any treatments there, and there's some substantial habitat. And Shuswap area, so Scotch Creek and the Scotch Creek Delta, and Shuswap Lake Provincial Park. We do get a permit there annually, so if the water comes up high enough, we can do some treatments in that park. We use larvicide. It's a biological agent. It looks like the picture there. It's a bacteria, Bacillus thuringiensis, variant israelensis. That bacteria makes a protein that they attach to corn cobs. So that's what it just looks like chicken food. When we apply the product, according to the label rates, it's safe for all other insects, amphibians, fish, mammals, us. It's very specific to mosquito larvae. We apply the product by hand or by helicopter. And when I say by hand, we put on backpack blowers. So they have, it looks like a leaf blower with a canister on the top that we fill with those granules. And we literally put on waders and walk out into the ponds where the larvae are present and kind of spray the product around the ponds. And then once sites are either too big for us to reach by ground in that critical timing when there's still larvae, or if the sites are inaccessible, they're either too deep or there's like trees to climb over that aren't safe or something, then we switch to helicopter treatments. And when we do helicopter treatments, we can obviously do many, over hundreds of hectares in a day if required. So I put together a little math project for Revelstoke this year. So this is 2025. This is a photograph that was sent by one of the techs on June 13th. It's a 300 ml cup. It's what we are dippers that we just basically walk up to standing water and take a dip and then count the larvae. He sent me this picture to show me that the larvae were in their third instar, which means that they were getting close to their pupal stage, and he needed a helicopter within 2 days. So that dipper had about 71 larvae in it. And I would say that's on the low side if we were looking at all of the habitat in Revelstoke this year. Here's some examples of some other dips that we can expect from the area. So the one on the left, that's about 350 larvae. And then the one on the right, they're quite condensed in there, probably about 6,000 larvae in a dip there. It's pretty hard to count, as you can imagine. So the math exercise, between May 1st and July 1st this year, we treated 880 hectares of habitat. We did it with 4 helicopter campaigns, and there was also about 100 hectares of ground treatments conducted. The larval density, so our threshold for treatment is when we take a dip with our 300 ml dipper, like the size of a yogurt container. If we see 3 larvae in there, we consider that enough to be worthy of treatment. So larval densities on the low end would range from 3 larvae per dip to probably around 600 larvae per dip was what we were seeing this year in Revelstoke. This year, the water was a lot lower. So most of the habitat is from the Columbia River, and the water depth didn't go super high this year. So when it first started to flood, our first treatment, the water was probably about 10 centimeters, and in some areas went to 100 centimeters over the treatment time. So when I did my math, I went very conservative, and I assumed that all 880 hectares of habitat was 10 centimeters deep. And that gave me a volume of habitat of 88,000 meters cubed. We know the meter's 300 mils. So we can do a little bit of math there. And I went again extremely conservatively and said that the average dip would be only 25 larvae per dip. And that came to 7.3 billion larvae. And these are, again, habitats right around downtown Revelstoke. So if we were to kill 99% of those larvae, which is truly impossible, that is absolutely not in the game at all. So I would say probably 80% would be an amazing amount to kill, that we, assuming we got every single area that we know is active. That still would leave 7.4 million mosquitoes to emerge right next to the town of Revelstoke. And this is from our known and our treated habitats. So we still are going to have habitats that we might not know about, maybe some pools in the forest. We have habitats on properties that we know are there, but we don't know who the landowner is and we can't treat. We have some habitats that are permanently attached to fish-bearing waters, so the province prefers that we don't treat those. And also there's habitats that are straight adjacent to our program that are producing mosquitoes, and obviously we don't treat those. So there's some other factors that influence our program annually. Obviously, the temperature, if it's warmer, the larvae grow faster. And this is also a problem like we saw this year when our sites were shallower than normal. The water didn't come up as high, so they grow very fast. And because they're growing fast, it means that we have to do more helicopter campaigns. So the water is coming slowly, rising, 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 rising. And new eggs are being wetted every day. So as soon as we start to see larvae getting their third instar, we know it's time to hit a helicopter, but that sets us back to ground zero is what I call it. And the water continues to rise. And so then we have to treat it again and rise. So the warmer it is and the shallower it is, the more often that we have to treat. We can't leave those larvae for a longer amount of time. If it rains, we can't fly our helicopters. It also recharges small sites in woodland areas that are hard for us to find. Obviously, if it's cool after the adults emerge, they extend their lifespan. And we have a lot of harborage area around in these programs. So we have those lush, gorgeous forests that are great shade for the adults to hide from the heat during the day. And then no treat areas, provincial parks, permanent habitats, property owners, all those things we've already talked about. So what are the take-home messages? Mosquito control can never be eradication. It's only reduction. We have too many variables. And even if everything came together and we had a perfect treatment, we're still going to have millions of mosquitoes that are going to emerge. Mosquito populations obviously are influenced by many factors, most of which are completely out of our control. And so none of our programs can replace the use of DEET, which is the best mosquito repellent. So something like Deep Woods Off is the best way to prevent mosquito bites. Use it according to the labels. And then I just threw in the slide. So there's a picture of our blower and of the helicopter. You may have seen it flying around Revelstoke or Scotch Creek or Golden with that big bucket underneath.
It's great, Cheryl. Thanks so much. If you wanted to maybe stop sharing your screen, that would be awesome. And there are a few myths. I know you had also mentioned before, people think, well, why don't we release some bats or
Right.
some dragonflies? As a scientist, what do you have to say about that?
So there is a lot of myths around both, well, dragonflies and bats specifically. So now that, we have a better understanding of how many mosquitoes that we're talking about. So if you look at a dragonfly, maybe it could eat 20 to 50, that'd be extreme insects in a night. But even if they all turned out to be mosquitoes, it's nothing, right? It's nothing in the mosquito world. Bats, the same thing. They did a study where they put a bat in a room with only mosquitoes to eat, and one of the bats ate, I don't know how many an hour, and then the media extrapolated, well, bats eat 6,000 mosquitoes a night. Well, that's not what happens. A bat is an insectivore, all of our bats in BC, and they are general insect eaters. So they use their radar to find the best food. And so they would way rather eat a moth rather than 50 little mosquitoes. And actually studies on bat guano show that mosquitoes are a very small part of their diet. But even if they did only eat mosquitoes, even if they did eat 6,000 per night, we're talking in millions and billions when we're talking those numbers. So they don't make a difference. They're not a way to control mosquitoes.
So of course, there's been a lot of conversation, particularly in Revelstoke this year, about how bad the situation has been.
Yes.
So what has made it so bad this year? And can you comment on maybe the different the treatment level that you've conducted in that area this year as compared to others?
So we did have done a lot of work there, like 4 helicopter campaigns, a lot of ground treatments. I talked to the helicopter pilot and I said, why? Because the mosquito, it was low water, which we would usually associate with less mosquitoes. And our pilot said that what's different about Revelstoke is when there's that low water in the Columbia wetlands, and there's super high grass there. When she's flying, she goes, I'll find the water, I'll fly along it, I'll be treating, think I got it all. I'll go to make a turn and I'll see a glint come up out of the grass somewhere else, and I got to go over there and treat. So it's really searching for habitats in this tall grass that she feels she must have just missed something. We're not sure. Also, when it's really shallow like that, like I talked about in the presentation, they develop very quickly. So we're racing against time with them and just trying to get as many as we possibly can while they're developing so quickly in that shallow, warm water that we saw this summer.
Right. So, these programs are not cheap. I did a little
No.
bit of research, and the Revelstoke budget is about $78,000 annually. This year, we asked for some more money from our reserve fund, another $50,000,
Yeah.
bringing that total up to 128,000, which is a lot.
Yes.
And you had said in one of your slides as well that if we were to treat some of the additional area in Revelstoke that we are allowed to treat, because as you
Right.
pointed out, we're not allowed to treat many areas, we probably would have to double or even triple that budget. A lot of
Easily.
money. The taxpayers pay for that. Um, in your opinion, do you think putting that kind of additional money in would make that much of a difference?
No. So I've never had ever in this program been constrained by budget. If I've needed a budget to treat the habitats that we treat, the CSRD's always approved it. And in most years, we can stay easily within the budget. Um, so the question is, do we want to expand the program? Is that what is causing all these mosquitoes? Should we increase the habitat, move more south of the airport? So we could go an extra 160 hectares and still be within our pest management plan. And that would probably increase our budget by at least 1.5 times. But directly south of that, there's another 300 hectares of habitat that we then should probably add in. But the further and further that we're getting away from downtown, which my understanding, the whole goal of this program is to provide relief for downtown Revelstoke. We're not going to be really making any difference to downtown. We may be making a difference to those few properties that are south of the airport, but for our goal of really reducing mosquitoes downtown, we're not going to make a big difference for a massive increase in the budget. And when I say you got to remember, if I say 160 hectares more, if we just south of the airport and then 300 past that, we don't treat those once. Those may have to be treated 4 times in order to get control, depending on how that river keeps rising and how warm it is, how many type treatments we need to do. So we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's not going to make that big difference downtown Revelstoke, which is the goal of the program. Does that make sense?
That absolutely does. Thanks, Cheryl.
Okay.
It's great to hear right directly from the source, from someone who's a scientist who has this background and understanding. It's difficult for people because, of course, they're annoyed,
It is.
and they would like to see,
I know.
some change. But there's also a financial reality, and like you say, then a reality of geography and of weather and of factors that are totally out of our control. So
Yeah.
what about next year? Are there plans to change the program, or are we just is the best thing to do just keep on where we're at?
I haven't been given any direction to increase boundaries or anything. So it will be the same habitats, the same control. And the difference, if there is going to be one, is on what the weather is, what the flooding looks like, how we can treat it. So if the water comes up higher and those habitats are easier to find, we can treat them. The other thing that happens, I forgot to mention with the Columbia, is once it gets to a certain height, a lot of that habitat blows out. I call it blows out. It starts to move. And so the mosquito larvae, they can't live in that running water. So it didn't really blow out this year. It stayed really shallow and didn't come up super high. Whereas if we can get it, if on a normal year, it would come up higher. So if we get some snow this winter and a higher snowpack than we've been seeing, maybe we'll get back to kind of more normal levels of flood and maybe some better control.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for your time today, Cheryl. We really appreciate you educating us, letting us know. And unfortunately, that does mean buying a few more cans of deep wood off
That's right.
to try
It
to stay the
works.
course for this year.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Great. Take care then. We'll hopefully see you back again next year.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.